So I'm going to, I'll let our experts talk. I would say if you do have a question, I'd like to ask right away. I find panels are a little bit more fun when they're interactive. So just put up your hand and we'll acknowledge you. But we'll start from my left and we'll go down the line, and everyone will introduce themselves and talk a bit about what they do, and we certainly do want to have time for questions and answers during this session. So Katie, turn over to you.
Wow, I didn't expect I'm going to do first. All right. This is me, right?
Yeah.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very much delighted to be here with all of you. So I'm Dr. Kathy Kamkar. I'm a clinical psychologist at Center for Addiction and Mental Health. I work within the Work, Stress, and Health program. Another name for our program is the Psychological Trauma program. And we deal primarily with occupational disability, occupational trauma, and post-traumatic stress disorders. I do specialize in the area of depression and anxiety disorders and workplace-related matters. I had the chance for several years to be part of the Hockey Talks, which is an amazing initiative to really promote mental health and have a better understanding of mental illness within the sport world, especially within hockey. Also, within my own personal life, my brother was a national table tennis player, so for many years, so every time Canada would win, my brother would win. He almost made it to the Olympics, but his other best friend was gaining his PhD in electrical engineering, so essentially full-time playing table tennis and then full-time for the PhD, so the PhD won over, so, but he's still playing, So I'm again very much delighted to be here. What I would like to talk about today is really the stigma attached to the mental illness. We're doing a lot of great work, but we have further improvement that needs to be done, especially within the world of sport. I would like to have a chance also to talk about some of the key stressors that athletes go through, and of course about some of the coping strategies and resiliency. Thank you.
Douglas, I do not have a brother who's an amazing athlete, like you said. My name is Dr. Madeline Marcus, and I'm also a clinical psychologist. I'm a quiet talker at the best of times. If you can't hear me, please wave at any point when I'm talking. I work in the Young Adult Eating Disorder Program at South Lake Regional Health Centre in Newmarket, Ontario, which is just north of here. And I also work in a private practice a few days a week called Broadview Psychology in Toronto. I'm quite interested in the area of eating disorders in athletes, and that's what I'd like to speak today about. Before I kind of launch in and we have our discussion today, I thought it might be helpful to spend a brief moment identifying various different eating disorders so that when we say eating disorders, we're all kind of aware of what we're discussing. So according to the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the DSM-5, there are 4 key, at least that I'll talk about now, eating disorders. Anorexia nervosa, which many of you might be familiar with, which is where someone significantly restricts the food consumption, which leads to a significantly low weight, and associated significant fear of gaining weight or becoming fat, and really influencing how they feel about themselves in relation to their body shape or weight. And then we have bulimia nervosa, which similarly someone would have an undue influence of their body in relation to their sense of self and self-esteem. For people who binge eat, which is consuming a large amount of food within a really short period of time, and have associated compensatory behaviors like purging through self-induced vomiting. You also have binge eating disorder, which is where people binge and eat a large amount of food in a short period of time, and something called other specified feeding or eating disorder. I know that's a lot of jumbled words, but I just thought it was helpful to kind of orient us a little bit today, and feel free to ask any other questions. And how this kind of links into athletes is we do see significantly more eating disorders in athletes, especially in elite athletes. And we know that the rates of treatment access and help seeking for people with eating disorders, especially in athletes, is quite low. And so it's important for us to have discussions like today to start decreasing the stigma, to address maybe somewhat the different warning signs might be, how coaches or family members or athletes themselves can identify and look towards seeking treatment. So hopefully we'll continue that discussion as we move forward.
Thank you. My name is Mark Allen. It's okay? My name is Mark Allen. I'm the Ontario Director for an organization called the Respect Group. But I spent close to 35 years as a police officer here in Ontario, and I wound up my career as the commander of the crime prevention section for the OPP. So in my past life, I dealt a lot with mental health in a number of areas, but one of them was about trying to sort of bridge the gap between police and those suffering from mental health in the community. And I also did a lot of work around the issue of child abuse investigations and prevention. So a few years ago, I crossed paths with a gentleman by the name of Sheldon Kennedy, who many of you will know, when we were testifying before a Senate committee in Ottawa on a piece of child protection legislation. Sheldon Kennedy, those of you who don't know, was an NHL player who had been sexually abused by his junior hockey coach, Graham James, and really suffered to the extent that he almost committed suicide as a result of that. When he finally came out with his abuse, he decided he wanted to make a change and educate coaches around issues of abuse prevention, bullying, and harassment. So he started an organization called the Respect Group. And to date, we've trained over 750,000 Canadians online in the issues of bullying, abuse, harassment, and discrimination. We have 4 programs: Respect in Sport for coaches, Respect in Sport for parents, Respect in the workplace, and Respect in school. Over half of those that have trained are coaches and youth activity leaders in Canada that receive this training. So as things are constantly changing, we constantly revamp this program. We just spent the last year rebuilding the Respect in Sport program from the ground up, and one of the key focuses was on bringing more mental health information and tools into it for coaches and youth activity leaders. And just as an example, we have expert clips within the training, and we brought 2 gentlemen in to talk about their experiences. One of them was a gentleman by the name of Glenn Canning. His daughter is Rhea Parsons, the young Nova Scotia girl that committed suicide about 3 years ago after being sexually bullied, sexually assaulted. It was all videotaped and posted online. And another gentleman is a gentleman by the name of Alan Hughley, who's an Ottawa City Councillor, and his son Jamie was gay, and he also committed suicide as a result of bullying. So we've really tried to bring good tools to coaches that are dealing with kids to help them understand, recognize the signs that they may be experiencing with kids that they're interacting with, helping them to understand that they may be the only trusted adult in this child's life, and they need to be aware of what they're seeing, and they need to understand both their moral and their legal duty to report things when things come to them. In reference to eating disorders, we're also rewriting the parent program right now, and one of the national sport organizations that's using our program is Synchro Canada, and they identified to us eating disorders with swimmers. So we've actually put a vignette in the new parent program, which deals with the fact that a young athlete is under pressure from a coach not to eat leading up to an event, and the critical importance of parents stepping in if they're aware of these types of things.
All right, awesome. So, well, I tend to speak fairly loud and project my voice. I apologize for that. So, my name is Darnell Gerard. I don't exactly have the academic or professional expertise of some of the others on our panel here today, but I think my expertise kind of comes from my own personal experiences and where I've been, where I come from. So, I just graduated from the University of Toronto. I was a dual sport athlete there. My academic focus was in human biology. I also dabbled in nutrition and neuroscience as well. I played both football and track and field on and off while I was there. And I say on and off because I had my own mental health struggles, and at times that had me take steps back from sport. And so I can kind of bring that experience and I guess some real world, I don't want to say advice because I don't know that I have advice. But yeah, my experience to this, and hopefully we can chat a little bit about that. During my time at the University of Toronto, I worked with a charitable organization called the Student Athlete Mental Health Initiative, or SAMI for short. And they're basically just looking at the unique challenges that athletes face. We know that everyone faces different struggles with their mental health at times. Obviously, mental health is a spectrum, right? You're never either healthy or completely sick. You range from day to day, from month to month, from year to year. We're all in different areas at different times. But SAMI just understands that student athletes in particular have unique challenges that they face. And so we're about pushing that out to the public and saying what coaches, what the community, what friends can do, and what you can do for self-care for yourself as well. And I now after I've graduated, worked for a charitable organization called jack.org. I don't know if anyone here has heard of that. So what we do is almost the same approach. We're very much youth focused, and we basically empower a network of youth all around the country through a bunch of different programming. So we have chapters at many high schools and universities here in Canada. We also go out and give, we call them Jack Talks. So I'm a Jack Talk speaker as well, which is maybe part of the reason I project my voice so much. But we go out and it's basically mental health advocacy. So we are trying to empower these youth to go out into their respective communities. We know that they know the challenges that are facing their specific communities and that there is no one solution. So we want them to go out and advocate and be passionate about starting a conversation about mental health. And that's exactly why I'm here today, because I love having these chats. So.
Thank you. Check. I'm Jacob Morris. So my story with mental health, I'm someone who lives with depression and anxiety. About a year and a half ago, I was in one of the probably worst spots of my life. How it ties into sport, one of the coping strategies that I found works best for me is physical activity, and what I do for that is run. So over the span of about a year and a half, I went from a place where getting out of bed in the morning was a challenge, and then stepping up and going out my front door was a place, was a huge accomplishment. To a place where I was running around the block and running a 5K, pushing it up a little bit, and then finally got to a place around last September when I ran my first half marathon. And it was that kind of euphoric moment. I had gone out, it was an evening about sunset, and I just got out to run a 5 kilometer run, which for me it can take me about 25 minutes. It's just gonna be a quick run. And running is kind of my meditation, the thing that I use to kind of be comfortable with my thoughts, give myself a place where I can think through what I'm going through. With severe anxiety, it can be really difficult sometimes to hold on to a thought and just go about your day. But running has been something that is not only a natural mood booster for me, and is obviously releasing a lot of endorphins and whatnot, but is something that can give me a challenge that is very achievable in front of me. And it was around last October where I said, in my career, I'm a freelance video producer, work mainly in digital video online, but I wanted to say, why not take my voice and my skills as a video producer and do something to spread not only my story, but then also connect with stories of other Canadians. So we just finished, and we did, in 1 month, I ran 10 half marathons across the country. We actually did it in 23 days. And we shot a documentary about it. We were sharing our journey on social media the whole way, connecting with Canadians across the country to talk about mental health. And we're also in support of CAMH, great organization, obviously. And our whole mantra about the campaign, which is called Run to Wellness, is about turning something that can be immobilizing to someone's life into something that's inspirational. I think what I'd like to talk about here on this panel today is, yes, there is a stigma around it, but I also think that sometimes when people are talking about mental health, and specifically anxiety and depression, there are people where some of the narrative can be fairly victimizing. It can be fairly othering, where you're talking, maybe not even necessarily down to someone, but it can kind of other them, where there's these people who are suffering from mental health, and there are these people who are not suffering from mental health. Whereas, the way I see it, we are all human beings, and we are people who, whether we're going through a severe bout of depression, or our neighbor is, or maybe someone we're just passing on the street, we can have that empathy and reach out to people and say, how are you doing? It's gonna be okay. And that's kind of what we're doing with Run to Wellness. We wanted to show that we can take on a huge physical challenge, running 10 half marathons in 23 days across the country, and do it because I'm someone who uses my own depression and anxiety to fuel me to do something that's pretty amazing, I think.
You make me want to go and run. And you did that injury-free?
Yeah, you did.
That's impressive. Hi everybody, my name is Sarah Galsworthy, and I come from a different perspective as well. In the day I work at Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center in the Injury Prevention Office. I'm a program coordinator there. And one of the programs we run is called PARTY. It stands for Prevent Alcohol and Risk-Related Trauma in Youth. And we really focus on that R word, which is risk-related, and much of what we talk about is prevention of suicide and awareness, suicide and self-harm, as many of our young people are facing this. And we're actually currently working on a research study where we're surveying our young people, so grades 11s and 12s, and we do this in 5 different countries. We're trying to figure out what their perception of risk are. I know what the statistics say, but we would like to know what theirs is. And out of a regular class of anywhere, average number from about 30 to 50, we're getting 1 in 3 students disclose that they would consider self-harm or suicide, that it is an option for them. So I know that programs like mine, when the data isn't we don't have it all inputted yet, but I can tell you what we're seeing is about 1 in 3, and that's consistent in the other countries that we're working with. And so we need to, obviously all of us need to do a little bit of a better job in that regard. So that's my day job. I also work, I'm a master trainer with Parks Rec Ontario with a program called High Five, which is Canada's only quality assurance program. And we train young adults to create, draw awareness to, when we have school-age children, creating environments where young people can thrive, both physically and emotionally safe, and understanding that things like meeting friends and sharing and social interactions need to be fostered and mentored. And done with intent at a really young age. We're trying to build better resiliency in our young people. The conversation we use is we all have mental health and we all have to take care of it. Is the language that we use. And we teach a course that's called Strengthening Children's Mental Health, and it's about creating some awareness and making sure that our young staff, so we're talking like summer camp staff, after school programs, sport programs, are going into the communities and not diagnosing our kids, but being aware that each child has a different story and we need to accommodate and nurture that story and make sure we have the avenues of support if needed. And I also do a little bit of work with Canada Sport for Life, so that's the Sport Connection. We work with physical literacy. And what we're trying to do is get our young people more active. We believe that if children are making more developmentally appropriate risks at younger ages through their natural physical and mental development, that then when they're faced with real world problems, that they're going to be more resilient and more adapt to do that. And I can see, traveling across the country, especially in this province, and teaching and talking to coaches and recreation staff. I think the conversation is going in a really great direction. And I think probably the most important job is I'm a mom to a 4-year-old who is starting to show some signs of some anxious behavior. If she's not in her Spider-Man suit, and this is like for reals, if you follow me on Facebook, nobody knows what my daughter's face looks like because she's 95% of the time in a Spider-Man outfit. She's like embodying him. But learning about how to nurture this young person and give her the tools and really educate our family on how to bring her up so she can be an awesome human and keep the world safe because she's super Spider-Man. So that's some of the work that I do, and most of the work is with our sort of school-age and teenagers throughout the province and in a few other countries. And you're making me want to run. I'm going to go for a run today. I am. I really am. You inspired me. I used to run a lot, and now I don't.
You can do it.
Thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Sarah. Ron. Before we move along, I just want to ask the cameras in the room quickly, how many people do we have in here that are athletes? Got athletes?
Yeah, sort of.
Weekend warriors? Coaches in the room? And parents, grandparents. Okay, what I'd like to do is I want to go through the panel again. I want to ask them about the warning signs with mental illness and how to help you identify. But I think I want to start with Darnell and Jacob and their experiences and did they see the warning signs or was there kind of a guardian angel that came along and made you understand that you were dealing with something beyond having a bad day at school or a bad game or a bad day at the office. So Darnell, we'll start with you.
Test. I'll test this time. For me, when I personally started to kind of have my struggles, we'll call them, when I started to get a little low, we call them almost like unipolar depressive episodes here. When this started to happen to me, I don't know that the signs were readily apparent to people because I don't know that people were educated on what to look for. And for me to, I guess it started when I realized that this was something that needed to be taken care of, to be, I may have needed to reach out to somebody. I was a part of a varsity board, so I was the chairman of our varsity board at the University of Toronto, so that was all of the student athlete leaders, I suppose. And we had our embedded varsity board counselor come in, so what a lot of students didn't know, myself included, is that every week we had a counselor available to us for mental health services that we could go in and talk with about what we were experiencing. And she came in and talked at one of our meetings and just kind of went over a few, I guess, signs that someone was struggling, and I kind of took a step back just internally, and I was like, well, like, this is how I feel. Like, I'm stressed to the point where I don't know how to cope with it myself. Self-help at this point is, I'm still struggling. I may need to actually reach out to somebody. So I didn't go to our counselor, but I started talking to a few friends, and just, I am an open person to a certain extent. Obviously, we all are. But I was finally at a point where I knew that I needed to reach out, but I know there's a lot of people who aren't there and who don't know how to, and that's obviously because there's a stigma associated with this stuff, and hopefully we're able to address that today. But I was able to reach out when I realized that I needed to, but yeah, I know a lot of people aren't. That's kind of where I'm at personally.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of warning signs and everything, there are definitely warning signs there if you are waking up like I was kind of every night in a panic attack, or not being able to go to sleep because you're hyperventilating. But I think in terms of knowing something was wrong, of course, I definitely knew something was wrong, but I'm also someone who loves to walk into a party or a room like this and have a big smile on my face and get to know everyone and put up a facade that I am okay. So I think for a long time, even though I did know that something was wrong, I really didn't want there to be something wrong, so I pretended that there wasn't. But I think that's part of the problem, is that even though, you know, like you said, everyone's kind of a different level of openness, and someone might be very comfortable talking to a close family member, or maybe a friend, a counselor, someone who is, you know, there to mentor them, that, you know, I'm not sure what's going on with me, I'm not sure who to reach out to. But then there are people like me who is, you know, several members of my family and close friends have, you know, all gone to therapists, and they've, you know, lots of people I know have been on different medications, or they have different coping strategies to deal with their own mental health. But for me, I think, especially in the industry that I work in, where the harder you work and the longer you work, the you know, it's kind of a badge of honor to be really stressed out and be the one who's working the hardest. But so you don't want to open up and say, hey, I'm struggling, I need to take a back seat, I need to be working on things I'm passionate about, putting my both physical and mental health first and foremost. So I got to a point where I wanted to make that change, but it's definitely something that's very difficult to get past.
Go back to Katie and work our way down the line again.
Thank you. Yes, I think that recognizing the warning signs is so important. So I would say, you know, in addition to everything we talked about, and similar to what has been addressed, any change in behavior, any change in personality, if we just don't want to engage in our daily structure or routine, especially as a parent or as a coach, as a teacher, we see a child doesn't want to do the routine anymore, the structure, their personality is a bit different, it could be more aggressive, maybe more withdrawn, we don't want to do our homework anymore, or anything we used to enjoy doing. It could be games, it could be playing with our friends, reading our book or homework. We decide suddenly we don't want to do it anymore. Or also any change in our overall functioning. It could be academic functioning, social functioning. So I would really pay attention to all those changes. And you know, as we talked about, we really want to normalize the talking about mental health, and ideally making it as easy as it is to talk about physical health problems. It's just so easy for people to talk about, you know, I have arthritis, I have back pain, I have a migraine, or cancer-related things. And so we really want to finally normalize the talk about mental illness. And this is very much true in terms of, you know, especially within athletes, because we know that 1 in 5 individuals suffer from mental illness. So that means very much every single person, each of us, whether directly or indirectly, are impacted by mental illness. And this is also true for athletes. Now within athletes, because there's so much pressure and emphasis on being physically and mentally fit and active and healthy, that they're even more likely to suffer from any mental health related problems. We know that whenever they suffer from a physical injury, right away there is a healthcare professional to ensure fast and speedy recovery, and ideally we really want to do the same thing for whenever they suffer from mental health problems. The other thing is that being physically and mentally fit and active and struggling with a physical problem or struggling from a mental health problem should not be mutually exclusive, right? We can be physically, mentally healthy and active and so on, and at the same time struggle physically or even mentally. And the other thing is seeking assistance is very much a sign of strength and courage and resilience.
I want to thank you for including that as the first question that you've asked, because I think it's such an important discussion to have around the early warning signs, because we know that earlier intervention across the, I can speak from an eating disorder perspective, but from all mental health concerns, early identification and access to the appropriate treatment, be that bibliotherapy like a self-help book, or access to a family doctor, or access to a therapist, psychologist, whomever, we know that the early identification is helpful, and it sometimes does take being aware of what those warning signs are before someone can say, okay, I have this sort of weird feeling in my tummy, I don't really know what it is. Oh, maybe that's me feeling anxious, right? To be able to put words to what someone's experience is. Thank you, I was just turned up. From an eating disorder perspective, I would say that all the things that Kathy spoke about also apply to eating disorders, early warning signs. They are a mental health concern as well. So you're going to see some people withdraw a little bit more. You're going to see some people disengage in things that they used to engage and gain pleasure from. Specifically from an eating disorder perspective, there's a number of different early warning signs that someone might see. And from a sports perspective, I think you are really going to see people like parents, especially for younger athletes. You're going to see people like coaches who spend so much time with the young athletes, maybe noticing some of these signs. And it could be initially an overemphasis on weight or shape, little comments that are made. It could be similarly to food. Someone might start on a diet, that then goes to the next step, that then goes to the next step. Or someone, I was hanging out at Billy's house last night, didn't have dinner, that adds up. And someone, you're realizing that you haven't had dinner with your 16-year-old daughter in a long time. And there could be really subtle things. Eating disorders can be quite sneaky. It's not the person, it's the eating disorder, and can be quite secretive. And so to start to be aware of that and to maybe address it in an open, non-judgmental fashion with the young person, be it as a parent or as a friend or as a coach, I think is really, really important. There are some eating disorder awareness programs out there, booklets specifically for coaches, specifically for parents around those early warning signs. You can Google it, I can send it to you if you get in touch with me, but there are some resources out there that go through and list all the different physical symptoms. One obvious one might be weight loss, for example. That might first indicate that someone has been consistently at this weight and then you've seen a decrease in that. I could ramble about a lot of different physical symptoms. But I think trust your gut as a parent and as a coach, that if something is sort of shifting in a direction that feels, makes you uncomfortable, and you're noticing some of those early signs, to address it and to suggest that someone reach out to their family doctor is often a really good first spot, and that treatment is out there and is available and is effective, so that someone can have the optimal performance from a sport perspective and not have all the short-term and long-term physical and mental complications that come along with eating disorders.
It's going to be pretty hard to add to what our experts have said, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about keeping kids in sport. And we had a bit of a discussion early on about, before we started here. The idea is that sport is fun and safe for kids, and that they'll be engaged in it for the rest of their life. Obviously, we all know it's a very positive thing for children and adults to be engaged in sport. But there's often kids that are playing one sport 12 months of the year and they're not doing anything else because their parents are pushing them to get to the elite levels of being an athlete. We know that for every adolescent boy that leaves sport, 5 girls leave sport. for a variety of reasons. So we're doing some work around how to train coaches to coach girls differently. But these are all issues. I mean, keeping kids in sport for the right reasons is critical. And again, I go back to something I said in the intro about how critical coaches and youth activity leaders are in the lives of kids. My previous life in policing, I worked a lot around the prevention of school shootings and threat assessment. And we talked about behavioral norms, and if somebody goes off, you know, their baseline behavior, it could be a warning sign, and that people who are close to these kids often ignore blatant indicators that somebody's heading down a pathway to serious violence. Well, if kids are going off their behavioral norms around some of the things we've talked about, and they're losing interest in sport, or they're, you know, eating disorders, all of these different things are critical. So this awareness piece and being able to talk about it like we are here today, and having those wonderful people that are volunteering their time to coach kids and lead kids, it's really important that they have some tools and some information. Because these kids, as I said before, we don't often know what their home life is, and this coach or this camp counselor may be the only trusted adult that this child feels that they can disclose to, or they may not disclose, but the hair goes up on the back of the youth leader or the coach's neck and says something isn't right. And they've got to have some tools to sort of recognize, because it's tough growing up for these kids these days. To have the type of leadership that can help these kids is really important.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in again super quickly. Just because I've noticed that we're addressing a lot of signs and symptoms that you can see in somebody else. And just as someone who has struggled myself, I just want to make sure that to put this out there for the athletes in the audience, the coaches, and really just everyone in general, is that we look to ourselves as well, and we try to see some of these signs and symptoms in ourselves. So if you start to notice feelings are becoming intense and long-lasting, and they're starting to affect the way that you go about your everyday life, it may be time to talk to somebody, right? So this is something I wish that I had known at the time when I was starting to struggle. I eventually withdrew from the football team. At a point, I went back eventually, but my struggles had gotten so difficult that I couldn't cope with everything that was going on around me. So a lot of the time, student athletes like myself, I was football, track and field. I had my degree, and I also worked 4 jobs on the side. In Canada, we don't always provide all that much funding. So, and my story is not all that unique either. That's something that we need to understand, is that a lot of student athletes, especially, there are many types of athletes, but student athletes go through a lot of rigors and stresses as well. So being able to have the tools to kind of look at themselves, like I wish I was able to. So when things are starting to affect you on a long-term basis, so like weeks to months, and these feelings aren't changing, and things that you're doing, your behaviors, the patterns, and the things that you love, when that's starting to change, you're not doing them the same way. It starts, we have to look at ourselves as well. So don't just look at others, make sure you critically assess yourself and make sure that you're okay. Take a step back and ask yourself that as well. It's a great skill to have.
You know, the interesting thing I find about working within the communities that we're engaging is that often sport is the answer, sport and recreation, put them in the same category. Sport is the answer to, and this is often what I hear from parents, my kid is stressed out so I can put them in sport. And the interesting thing with my work with Canada Sport for Life is that our sport model has changed, and in the long-term athletic development plan is we're pushing our coaches to specialize our athletes later. There's some sport-specific schools that we have. There's some in Markham in particular where athletes can get their academic requirements as well as thrive in their sport, and they don't specialize till at least 16, which you know is still a young age. But so back to the parents. So the parents are saying, my kid's stressed out is usually the language that we're hearing, and so we're going to get them in sport, and that's where this really interesting conversation ensues. Because a few years ago, Parks Rec Ontario did a survey of thousands of children in Ontario and asked them, why do you register in sport? Why do you want to play sport? And any guesses what their number 1 and 2 reasons were? Any guesses? Fun and friends were their first reasons, and then kind of parents come later, right? My parents, right, the crazy parent. And then, not that any of us are crazy parents. And the number 1 reason why they're pulling out of sport is because it's too competitive. And when we're having, what was the number? 1 in 4, 1 in 5 are struggling. 1 in 5 are struggling. We're putting them in these high-stress pressure cookers to perform. We're setting our children up for failure. And it's this cycle that we're trying to get ourselves out of. In Sport for Life, we're encouraging this conversation, which is physical literacy, is building fundamental movement skills. You would never throw your child into their first year at school and give them a book and say, here, go read that book and figure out how to read it. No, we rewind the skill set and we teach them ABCs, we teach them words and paragraphs, and eventually they can write a book or write a Mother's Day or Father's Day card to their parents. Or do blogging and do videoing and all these really cool stuff, get your PhDs. But you gotta learn how to do an ABC before you can get there. And with sport, we just throw kids in Canada. We reward coaches who win, regardless of how they win. Throw the kid in, give him some soccer balls, or her some soccer balls, or give me a sport equipment. And we're not teaching them the fundamental movement skills, how to hop, skip, jump, zigzag, do all these important things so they can do these advanced movements. It's incredibly vulnerable for them to move their bodies in an environment with other kids. So that's the work we're doing and trying to get our parents and our summer camp and our young coaches to just kind of slow down a little bit and pull back. We're doing work in Markham, which is the community where I live. And we're doing this, we're trying to change the language we use with sport and getting kids to register. And the director of recreation is saying to us, there is no way when we use this inclusive language, like come learn how to move your body, come learn about the essence of sport, the movement within sport. There's no way our parents are going to register their kids because they're parents. They want their kids to learn skills, drills, they want to be competitive, they want their kids to come home and say, my team won that soccer or football or that race. And we know that sport is so much more than that. And if we look at a lot of our national athletes, they started playing outside, unsupervised, in these free, unstructured environments and got into sport a little bit later, started to specialize later. So, so that the conversation's definitely starting to continue and making sure that when those children are starting to get identified. And like I was telling you earlier, our staff, we want to make sure they're not saying, oh, you didn't do your homework today? We got a problem with this kid. Because that's essentially what happens. They see one sign and everybody sort of reacts. It's about knowing your kids, understanding who they are, and getting them to the right places, not overreacting or underreacting. I think there's an important balance there.
Thanks, Sarah. Do we have any questions right now? Sure.
So thank you so much. This is an amazing panel. Everyone is. I'd love to ask every single one of you questions, but I do have 2 areas of interest, and then and it's for people at this end right now. So I'm curious about workplaces. So I write for MedCan. And so we focus about mental health in the workplace. So perhaps you could just speak to how the discussion we're having today in the workplace. And then I'm also curious about police and what we're seeing in the media right now, the case in Ottawa where a man died, mental health training with police. I know that that's huge. Maybe you could give us some insight. Thank you.
Definitely, I think that right now the topic of mental health in the workplace is very predominant, and actually this is one of the key areas that I specialize in, and I go into the ministries and organizations giving this type of talk. We know that aside from home, the workplace is a primary location of the adult life, and so our work plays a tremendous role in our mental health, in our well-being, and quality of life. And right now also increasingly employers are becoming more aware of the importance of mental health in the workplace, and they're trying to kind of instill a lot of procedures and policies and kind of exactly everything into place to help instill mental health in the workplace. We know that the healthcare costs annually in Canada is around $51 billion annually. 35% of it is associated with mental health disabilities, and that's because within our work, if we suffer from any mental health issues, it can affect our productivity. So productivity goes down, absenteeism increases. There's also an increase in presenteeism. This is when we're at work, but we are not able to achieve our full potential, and short-term and long-term disability. So this is a very predominant area. We have come a long way. So in terms of increasing awareness, there's definitely more room to be involved in. Did you have any more specific questions in terms of mental health at work?
The Canadian Mental Health Commission, they have, mental health first aid. We see that as a really great tool. Do you know of a lot of workplaces encouraging their managers or even employees to get mental health first aid, because then people will see their colleagues along the spectrum and then they'll actually know, hey, you're showing signs of being yellow today, or you're showing signs of being orange today. Is that something that workplaces are picking up?
Yes, I would say yes. Definitely, is that we need to do much more. I think the idea would be that if we see someone struggling, then we want to show, as we had talked about earlier, right? We want to show a listening and acceptance and showing sympathy and empathy, and definitely guide the person to whatever resources. So I think this is a very important one, along with other resources that could help. So flexible work conditions that could help, and also there are some other key factors that contribute to mental health within the workplace. But in terms of resources and guiding person to the appropriate resource, yes. But again, it's an ongoing improvement. Yeah, but I agree with you. It's very important.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'll just speak. Still on here?
Yep.
How's that?
Oh, now it's on.
Okay. So speaking to the workplace, I'll just mention, because we have a program called Respecting the Workplace, and a great deal of that focuses on mental health. And we work very closely with the Mental Health Commission of Canada and sort of support the efforts. And it's interesting that organizations that are using our program are very, again, as our programs adapt and evolve over the years, as new things come to light, mental health has become front and center with our workplace program, the same as it has with the sport program. In terms of the police interaction with those with mental health, I know as much about what happened in Ottawa as you do from watching the news. A great deal has taken place over the last number of years, and I was very much involved with it when I was still with the OPP in bringing crisis intervention training to police officers to de-escalate situations. I sat on the Attorney General's task force here in Ontario around trying to decriminalize mental health behavior. I remember one of the judges that sat on the round table was trying to figure out why he had an individual in his court who had kissed a streetcar here in Toronto, but there was a gentleman who had kissed a streetcar who was in this judge's mental health court. Unfortunately, the system sometimes is such that the only way to get immediate services is if the person is in custody. And it's very unfortunate that the system sometimes has to be manipulated that way to get immediate services or get an assessment ordered for an individual. But I can tell you, like these situations, I mean, there's individuals, an individual in Ottawa apparently died at the hands of police. There are police officers being killed by people with mental health. So a lot of work is being done to really try and create awareness for police officers and provide new tools around de-escalation to try and avoid these situations, because they're tragic for all involved. I mean, they really are. 5 officers shot and killed in Dallas, 3 in Baton Rouge as a result of the violence in the U.S. is just, it's a mess right now. And so hopefully, cooler heads will prevail, and it sounds like it's come to a boiling point in the U.S. where and I've heard some police leaders saying like enough's enough, and they are acknowledging that they need to do something about police training and to try and avoid these types of situations.
Anybody else want to chime in on that? Oh. Any other questions? Oh, sure, just hang on a second. I think Leon's going to bring the mic over to you.
Hi. Obviously, high-performance sport by its nature is a highly stressful environment. Do you feel that competition, like maybe not performing, can exacerbate mental health issues with athletes? And if anyone has anything.
Do you want to start, Sarah, with that?
Yeah, I was going to throw it down at that end, but maybe we can share it a little bit. My work is often with school-aged children, and so it's developmentally appropriate, and we know that some children thrive in that environment and some people do not, and it's really about understanding that. But I can assure you that just having it as putting children in sport to cure mental health and make them more resilient is not the way we want to talk about sport, right? We want people to take care of themselves and be healthy, but we want to make sure that we have that balance. So I can assure you that putting our young children, our school-aged children, in really competitive environments, if that child's not ready or is predisposed or is suffering, we're going to continue with these incredibly scary dropout rates that we're seeing, especially for our young girls. But I think that the panel at the end will.
Maybe I'll add a little bit from an eating disorder perspective, and then we can also speak more generally. If you think about someone, especially for certain sports that are more weight driven or shape driven, as a lot of, a number of them are, if you're receiving negative feedback from a performance perspective. I think that can heighten if I could only just lose 5 more pounds and get to a different shape. Or if I could just get my body a certain way, you can see how if someone has the biological predisposition to developing an eating disorder, you add on that stress, you add on that pressure to be a certain ideal, especially if someone is not performing at the level that they are hoping to or expecting to, or their coaches or family are putting that added pressure on. I think also it can get reinforced if someone is fitting into that ideal a little bit more as they are restricting their energy intake more. That is going to reinforce that behavior, and that someone, all of us, would feel more driven than to continue to try to meet that ideal because it's being reinforced and positively by people around us, most likely. And so I think from an eating disorder perspective, certainly that can be the case. The other thing, just to mention, we haven't mentioned the term perfectionism, but a lot of people who experience eating disorders, there's a lot of overlap in terms of perfectionism. And then in sports, you would also see that as well. And so if someone is driven so strong from just a personality trait in an area, in an industry that is also very perfectionism driven, that can sort of exacerbate the stressors from eating disorders perspective, but more generally. I wonder if you want to add a couple.
Thank you. I think that generally speaking, there is a difference between, playing a leisure activity, meaningful activity like a sport, like 20 minutes here, 30 minutes here versus, we are entrenched into becoming an athlete and so on. If we do struggle from a mental health problem, obviously we want to build our protective factors. Sport can be one of them, but again, knowing the boundary, knowing the limit so that we can deal with the stresses, as you mentioned, it doesn't complicate the matters, right? So it's essentially where we can create that limit. Now, in the world of sport and athletes, there are some key stressors. Not only they have to deal with daily life struggles, like all of us, and significant life events, but there are some inherent stressors that they go through. Obviously, the intense training and preparation, and a lot of anxiety. Anxiety over underperforming, anxiety over letting others down, anxiety over not achieving our goals and standards and expectations, obviously anxiety before competition, during the competition, and at times also guilt and rumination and anxiety after the competition, and also at times we have to sacrifice other areas of our life, social events or events with families and so on, because again of the heavy training and preparation. And needless to say, the physical injuries and pain. So there are a lot of inherent stressors that very much athletes go through.
Just as I hand the mic back, I just want to add one thing. I feel like we also should identify how important sport and physical activity can be for mental health, right? I think we've been talking a little bit on some of the complications that we see from a mental health perspective. There's a whole massive body of literature and research in the area of the importance of exercise in improving our mental health. And I don't think that we want to erase all forms of sport. There's a huge amount of importance in that. And from an eating disorder perspective, my goal isn't to have someone stop all activity. It's to return to activity as is appropriate for that person. And I think that that's just a piece that I want to add because I felt like we were addressing.
I just wanted to say that in Canada today we're seeing 1 in 4 of our children are at risk for inactivity and essentially obesity, and which causes extreme stress. Right. Whoa. Shh. So 1 in 4 of our kids are inactive. So yeah, definitely. I'm so glad you said that, because sport certainly can complicate things, but it also is a beautiful experience. I came from sport, and we want to make sure that we do encourage kids, and our role sometimes is educating parents on making sure they pick the right environment for their child and those right coaches. Not just a winning team. Is it an inclusive team? Is it a supportive team? Is it a safe team? Those sorts of things.
Yeah, I guess just to piggyback off of that, I'm obviously talking about like some of my negative experiences with sport and how that stressed me, but it is an absolutely incredible thing as well, right? There's a reason that so many people are involved with sport, that we put our children in. That's where like the environment does play a huge role, where coaches and parents can play an enormous role for children, for athletes all the way up in age. Having these safe, supportive environments, so pre-competition, not just for coaches, not just asking your athlete how your legs feel, like, are you ready for this, but like, saying, how do you feel? Like, getting a real feel for your athletes, like, on an individual basis and how they're feeling can go a long way. So it's the community that's around them that really, really does impact how the sport plays a role in their life.
Yeah, totally. And just branching off of that, like, we've talked a lot about seeing the warning signs of mental health, but I think a lot of that has been focused on sort of what happens when someone is severely depressed, right? But mental health is something that you have to think about constantly. Everyone has a mind in here, and prevention is a huge thing as well, right? Like, someone can pop a vitamin C and wash their hands so they don't get sick every day, but no one's thinking, what should I do to maintain my mental health on a daily basis? And then back to the competition, like you said, I think competition can be healthy, and there is something engaging about competition and being on a team where it is fun to win, but sometimes it can be fun to lose as well. And I think one of the main things with sport, and this can tie into maybe the way that coaching is happening as well, but one thing that's extremely important to remember is that failure is fine, right? Like, going out and losing is okay. I recently ran, a couple of months ago, the Sporting Life 10K here in Toronto, and I ran the fastest 10K that I've ever run, right? But about 900 people still crossed the finish line before me. Does that make me a failure? No, I still had a great day, I felt great about myself, and there was something that you can draw from that, right? Like, you don't have to say, oh, I'm in this running race, but I didn't come first, so I'm a loser, and I gotta feel bad about myself about that. It's about kind of looking at sport from a different perspective and saying, I'm enjoying participating in this physical activity, and I'm going to continue to do it because it's making me feel good. And even if I come last, even if I'm like the 20,000th person across the finish line, I still get a medal and a bagel at the end of it, and I feel good.
I'm just going to say quickly, that's a key message. I think it's a message that needs to come from the coaches and parents. Anybody that's a golf fan watched Phil Mickelson and Henrik Stenson 2 Sundays ago. I think that's one of the greatest 4 hours of sports I've ever watched. And at the end of the day, Phil Mickelson finished second and in essence lost, but you sure can't say he lost. The guy played his rear end off that day, just happened to get outplayed by a better golfer on that day.
I just loved, what you said, and also especially how you said it, and you made it in such a fun way. And this is so, so true, right? As to how we always need to recognize our positives and our strength, and what have I learned about myself. And we always want to focus on what do I have control over, but especially of our positives and our strength, so that we can move forward and then build our self-confidence. And the other thing is that, as very much you said, we don't want to base our sense of self-worth based on the outcome. Regardless of the outcome, we need to celebrate the hard work and the positives and strength. And the positives and strength remain regardless of the outcome. Now, whether this is sport or in anything that we do in our life, especially performance situations, but in anything that we do in our life, we always have to be mindful and to praise our positives and our contributions and our hard work. Again, regardless of the outcome. So thank you for bringing that up. Very true, very true.
I think we have about 5 minutes left. Okay, go ahead, Brent. This mic's right beside you.
Thank you, Amen. Can you hear? Perfect, thank you. Speaking as an elite level or former elite level athlete, I spent 20 years as a competitive triathlete in commenting on the weight situation. As an athlete, yeah, we do lose weight for performance, and it's interesting because there's that emotional contingency. You're around teammates that are doing the same thing, but you also see performance results. You're getting faster, you're getting faster, you're getting faster. And there's a big divide between elite level athletes and recreational athletes. And I think that's something we really have to distinguish between, because that recreational athlete, there's a lot of benefit there from a health and wellness standpoint. When we look at the elite level, yeah, there's a lot of mental challenges as an athlete I went through. I remember when I stopped competing, I put on weight, 10, 15 pounds. It doesn't sound like much, but I felt so much healthier. The flip side is, though, when I'm qualifying for world championships, it's seconds that gets me, a spot at the world level. And then it starts over again because the level of competition is just going up. And, a great example of, health and wellness and mental health in sport gone awry. just look at the former, quote, 7-time winner of the Tour de France. That's all encapsulated in that story there. It's a great example, but that weight and performance, it's, at that level, it's always going to be, yeah.
I think you're highlighting so many important things from both a weight perspective, not even an eating disorder. I mean, I see where we can talk from a continuum perspective, right? We talk eating disorders on one end of this spectrum, and there's many different ranges of relationship with body, weight, food, etc. And you're so right about the distinction between an elite athlete versus someone who goes for a 5K run on a Thursday evening, right? There's quite a big difference in terms of that. And regardless, though, someone who might be, you're going to be really reinforced for keeping at that. I think we were talking before about that, I can't remember the term they used, but the competition weight. You're going to be reinforced for having that competition weight because you're getting that seconds more. And sometimes people do need to keep at that weight, and that's reinforcing, and it does lead to improved performance. There's something called the athlete triad. I'm probably misremembering the exact definition, where sometimes people who are elite athletes will have, for females, for example, they will have amenorrhea, so they'll lose their period, right? That is sometimes quite common in people who are elite athletes and have really low body weight. It can still lead to a lot of long-term health complications, even if they don't necessarily have an eating disorder, right? It might lead to difficulties in terms of what you probably heard.
It's just that's very
Yeah.
common. Usually, if a female athlete's not there, she's probably not at her ideal racing state,
Yeah.
believe it or not.
And it is really complicated. It's something that I work sometimes with some of my clients around. If someone has a very entrenched eating disorder and it has been reinforced and they have gone to that where they are restricting so much so that their energy input is significantly lower than their energy output, especially if they're an elite athlete, there's lots of energy output, that there's health complications that people might need to take breaks from. If there's concerns with their heart, for example, they might need to take breaks from that sport, and that, I'm sure, for someone who's been working that hard at that level has got to be very, very difficult to acknowledge and to take that time out from the training. But you raise many different, variety of different important pieces. Thanks.
Okay, kind of feel like, yeah, it's 2 o'clock, but let's take one more question.
Is somebody there?
We'll take 2 more questions.
All right. My question kind of lies within like eating disorders, but I wanted to know because currently there is a lot of like different eating patterns that kind of are like in the nutrition world, specifically within fasting and intermittent fasting. What would be, in terms of like warning signs, what would be specific warning signs in terms of eating disorders and if someone might be fasting excessively?
First off, not a dietitian or nutritionist, so I think that there's lots of amazing dietitians out there who can answer probably in a more articulate fashion than I can, but I'll do my best. There are so many fad diets out there. There's so many, I'll remove the word fad. There's so many diets out there, right, that people hear, fasting, paleo, etc., etc. And we hear it in the media all the time, and we sometimes are conveyed that this is a healthy approach to getting the body that we want or the weight that we want. I read a study recently where they looked across the board at a lot of the different fad diets that have come in and out over the years, and really at the end of the day demonstrated that a lot of them, they might be effective in the short term for immediate weight loss. They might have longer term potential complications health-wise. They don't necessarily learn to lean to longevity in terms of that weight loss. And so basically the message is diets don't work in the way that I think our broader society sort of hopes or wants them to. And so from a fasting perspective, I always get sort of, my gut get kind of anxious about it from an eating disorder perspective, that sometimes I have had people who've started to fast and it might have kick-started more disordered type eating. But again, it's a continuum, right? So it's not to say that someone who's fasting has an eating disorder. It could be an indication of someone who struggles from a body image perspective and a want to decrease their weight. And it might be a warning sign, but it's not necessarily to say that it is, because there are so many different diets out there that people do. I'm mindful of time.
Okay, we'll take one more question. Hopefully our panel can stick around for a few minutes afterwards in case there are questions. So we'll take a question right here.
I just like these two gentlemen. Congratulations for your recovery from whatever problem you had. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, congratulations for two of you. I just want to know, were you ever under the care of the physician that who like to prescribe you antidepressants, stuff like that? Were you ever on that?
I can say that, oh, sorry. I can say that I personally never took any antidepressants or anything like that, so I was never on any medication at all.
Okay. So you recovered on your own in a way?
Yeah,
Support, yes.
myself as well. I've never taken any medication for it, but one thing that I do say, when talking about mental health,
Yeah.
running is something that really benefited me, but there's really no one solution that fits all, right? Like it might be a combination of medication and therapy and physical activity or any one of those individually, right? So it's just kind of being open about you getting help and finding what works for you.
Yeah. So you never received any medical treatment or anything like that?
Yeah, no, I don't think either of us. I think it was just understanding that there was an issue, seeking help, and then having a supportive community around us. That was I think what helped the two of us. And I can't really speak for you, but I believe that's what helped us, yeah.
Because a lot of people having problem like that, they just ask the doctor to prescribe something, I read an article, so many people, I don't know, millions, walk in the street, they are antidepressant.
Thank you so much for your questions. Steve McAllister, you did a great job moderating. That's a large panel. And thank you to all of our panelists. I just wanted to say a couple of quick words. Really, first off, thanks to TELUS. This is a beautiful venue, and we're really grateful that they allow us to use this. Thank you to you for coming. The Lunch and Learns are regular in a series for us. We don't have another one coming up to announce. We tend to have one in September tied into the film festival. So stay tuned to our website, maybe subscribe to our newsletter, and you'll get word of that if we have it. Our next event is a full-day conference in this venue, all on recovery. It is called Bright Future. Check on our website to look at for that. It should be really good. Lots of great speakers. The keynote speaker is Tammy Sutherland. She's one of the morning hosts of Breakfast Television. We'll have a few opening remarks by Sophie Trudeau, the Prime Minister's wife. And lots of panels throughout the day. So please sign up for that and come. We'd love to see you there. And then our Silver Dinner, which is our annual fundraiser, is on November 2nd. That may seem like that's a far way away in the middle of a beautiful day like today, but it's coming up, and if that's of interest to you, again, look to our website. I also want to give Chelsea Riccio, who's our communications manager, just 1 second to plug a couple of things herself, and then class dismissed. So.
Yeah, so speaking of sports, the Scotiabank Toronto Waterfront Marathon is coming up on October 16th, which seems really far away, but I'm telling you because we are actually one of the featured charities that you can run on behalf of. So basically you can register for the marathon, run the marathon, and also raise money for us, basically. And it's not just a marathon, there's a half marathon and a 5K as well as like a walk-in option. So you may have seen these like beautiful cards at registration. If you didn't pick one up, please do. There's the link on here to register, and like we also have some exclusive promo codes that you can use. But yeah, no, obviously they talked a lot about how running can be beneficial for your mental health for some people. And it's also like, it's gonna be a great kind of like team building, community type of feel to it. And the fundraising aspect of it is really easy. Like we basically give you all the tools to do it. You get your own fundraising page, and there's some like fun perks and stuff. So yeah, pick up one of these, and if you have any questions about it, please feel free to talk to me. But yeah, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that was great.